Morning everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on another of our online meetings. For anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Diane Richardson. I'm the Member Engagement Board member on the cluster. We've obviously had to, like everybody else, really change what we do, but a couple of years ago when I was studying, a quote came up and really said something to me, and I wanted to share it with you this morning, because I saw it again when I was reading Rebel Ideas, a book I can highly recommend at the weekend. And this was said in 1848. I'll let you read it rather than read it out to you. But when I read it again over the weekend, I thought, this is what the cluster does. This is what the cluster is about. We are such a diverse set of businesses, but what we do is put all of them into a room. Now that room might be virtual now, but we're adjusting to that. We're getting used to it. But it really is, to me, this is the power of the cluster in this quote. And one of the things we've done as we've adjusted is really try and take on what you're feeding back to us. So I'm really keen to encourage you all, this is your cluster. It doesn't belong to the directors, it's your cluster. I want to encourage you all to give us feedback all the time. Tell us about things that you want us to do. Let us know if you think there's something we could use online that we haven't clicked onto. Really communicate with us through this period of time so we can support you. Now, some of the ways that we are supporting you, a couple of things we've got coming up this week. So on Friday, we've got a general coffee time, care and share. So if you want to pop into that and talk to a few other people on the cluster and just have that kind of water cooler moment where you can just have a bit of a chat, that's happening on Friday. We've also got a workshop about managing home workers through COVID, so have a look at that. There's quite a few signed up already. Our meeting next week on the 6th of May will actually change time, so that will be at 2 p.m. and that's to fit in with Trudy Harrison's diary. So she's going to come and talk to us, which is great because she's not just the MP for Copeland, but also the private parliamentary secretary for Boris Johnson. So if you've got questions for her, get yourself signed up for that meeting next week. We're also going to trial talking about feedback. You fed back to us, you're really missing the networking, and I get that because I am as well. So we're going to trial some online networking. So come and give that a go with us. It might be slightly more difficult online, but we're going to give it our best shot. And the final thing I wanted to mention was at the end of this session, we'll ask you again to do some mentee feedback for us. Just to let us know whether this has been useful, and it helps us to adjust what we're doing as we go along and get this all figured out. So that's quite enough from me. Don't forget to use the chat if you have any questions or anything like that as we go along. But I'd like to welcome Miranda as our first speaker to talk about what's happening with Cumbria LEP, which is the Local Enterprise Partnership. Over to you, Miranda.
Thanks, Diane. Good morning, everybody. So just to introduce myself, I'm Miranda Kirschel. I'm Head of Business and Innovation at the Cumbria Local Enterprise Partnership. I wanted to talk about COVID-19 response activity at present, which is happening all over the county, and just to take people through what's going on. But just in case anyone's not familiar with the LEP, I just wanted to do a quick intro to who we are, what we do. So the purpose of LEPs around the country, there are 38 LEPs, is to develop strategies for each of their regions, to invest in local development and infrastructure, to be advocates for the county at the wider national and international level, and to facilitate coordination between all of the other organisations that exist in the county, and provide a coordinated approach to how we deliver the strategy for the county. And it's really all about driving forward economic growth, improving the productivity of the county, helping businesses become more efficient, helping them grow and scale. And some of the other things that we do through our governance structure, which is basically based around the 5 strategic priorities identified in the local industrial strategy. If you haven't seen our local industrial strategy, do have a look on our website. There's a an actual report on there, and there's also the evidence base. So you'll see that there was a lot of data that was gathered and statistics on what's going on in the county to produce that local industrial strategy. Cumbria was one of the first to actually finalise their local industrial strategy for government. Obviously, that activity is currently a little bit on hold, but we still use that as the sort of crib sheet for what we want to achieve and what we think the county wants to achieve. There was a lot of consultation and coordination, again, through the process to develop that. So that is based on what we've heard from the county itself. So my role is to look after the business and the innovation, ideas and innovation elements of that 5-pronged strategy. There is also skills, places and infrastructure are the other 3, which are headed up by my colleagues. What happens then is a sort of a matrix effect of the strategic kind of pillars that we have, and then across are all the different sectors. So we have 9 sectors that we cover, and they are the sectors that are dominant in our county. The way we then implement the strategy is through a governance structure, which is basically made up of our board, and then a series of strategic groups based around the 5 priorities, and then 9 sector panels. They all meet, they develop what they believe to be the strategy for Cumbria in each of those areas, and then it's delivered on a sort of day-to-day basis by the executive, so our team. And depending on what the agreed approach is, it might be partners that are delivering it, it could be skills organisations, it could be other organisations that support business, and it could be sort of a joint effort between different members of those panels. That is how we operate at the moment. And just to say, we've agreed that we'll have questions at the end. So if there are any questions, please do save them for the end of the presentation, and then I'm happy to answer anything that you'd like to know. So going on to the COVID response activity. So obviously unprecedented times. The team do have experience in responding to crisis situations. Obviously there's been nothing like this. My son apparently wants a hot dog right now. This is the joy of trying to work while you're also parenting.
Not right now. I'm still the best of us.
And then I'll make you a hot dog. We immediately, when this crisis hit, we immediately set up the Business and Economic Resilience and Recovery Group, which is a group of all of the membership organisations that exist, such as the business cluster. John Granger is our representative from the business cluster on the group. There are about 40 organisations, businesses, and the local sort of district councils and the county council. And we also now have a BECBC representative, so a Department for Business representative on that group. It meets twice a week in a similar format to this on a Zoom call, and what we do is discuss all of the issues that are arising. So where the government has implemented any mechanisms to support businesses to help us get through this period, we'll discuss those. We have a professional services advisor who explains things, and anything that's not clear, prepares documents for us to review on specific mechanisms, and then we invite any intelligence, any impact information that the members of the group are aware of to discuss and to escalate to government if we don't have any solutions or we're not aware of any solutions for any particular issues. So that is BECBC. It is there also to mitigate from the impact, so identify mitigation strategies. It is there to begin to agree a recovery approach, and that is the kind of period that we're at the moment. So we've just started discussing what we think recovery needs to look like for Cumbria. There are other groups that that were initiated as soon as we entered this phase. Strategic Coordinating Group is a group that brings together all of the public services. So we've got NHS, we've got the police department on there. They discuss all of the issues of concern to them. They look at the data in terms of cases, in terms of the situation in hospitals, and primarily in terms of PPE and the response on that need that has existed over the last few weeks. So there is a logistics subgroup to that group that looks at demand versus supply of PPE, and it is, I have to say, a very difficult balance to strike in terms of there's some amazing things happening in the county. Businesses are responding by diversifying and producing PPE in a way that is absolutely incredible in terms of how quickly they are repurposing their factories, their businesses to do that. And we need to make sure that there is a clear understanding of how much of each item is needed in order to ensure we have the right amount of each thing that we need being produced, so we don't end up with bulk of one thing and then not enough of something else. So that's quite an interesting one. My colleague John Power is our representative on that group. And then we're also, I talked about the mechanisms, we're also providing business support in and of itself. So we have businesses contacting us all of the time, every day, asking us for advice on what they might be eligible for in terms of financial support, in terms of whether they're eligible for the grants that exist out there. If they're not eligible, what else is available to them in terms of how they can continue existing and being sustainable over the course of the next few weeks and months. Any information that they need to understand any of the mechanisms that are in place. So there's lots of business support activity going on as well, and anything that we identify that's sort of a business that's fallen through the crack or a gap, we then escalate that again to government. I produce weekly reports on a Monday that are submitted at noon, that go into BEIS, and they escalate all of the issues that we identify, and then that happens at other levels as well through our CEO, Joe Lappin. We have also been supporting the district councils, so they are in the process of disseminating all of the grants that are available to support businesses, either small businesses or businesses in the leisure, hospitality and retail sector. Which obviously were announced by government. So they are trying to, as quickly as possible, get those grants out the door. Now, there was a deadline set for when that activity would finish, which is the end of this week. So they've been trying very hard to get those grants out to businesses, but they do need the businesses to apply. It's a very, very simple system where you literally enter your contact details, the registration number that you have for rates, and then just your bank details. And that's the main reason why you do need to apply at all, is because they don't always hold the bank details of all of the businesses on their systems. So so they just need businesses to come forward and apply. We're about 65% of businesses receiving their grants so far around the whole county, that is. So it's different levels in different districts. Some are further forward than others, but they are, for the most part, at a similar level at the moment. So what we've been trying to do to escalate and encourage businesses to apply for their grants is we've formed a small mini call centre in the lab to ring around all of the businesses, at least for South Lakeland at the moment, who are the ones that have really struggled because they have a lot of businesses that have not applied for the grants, possibly because they are in the visitor economy and they're not aware of what's available to them. So that is an operation that's happening. We did have the call centre running before to ask businesses if they would support us with production of PPE or offer of PPE to be given to NHS trusts. So, so this is a sort of a second call centre setup that we've got. And then we're in the process of also thinking about the phasing out of lockdown and what that will mean and how we can deliver that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So finally, one of the things that we're also trying to do is to really promote the amazing response that Cumbria has demonstrated and the resilience that we've seen from Cumbrian businesses, to ensure that the message is, yes, stay at home if that's the best option for you, but if you're able to work safely and continue working, and businesses can continue operating safely, then we're trying to encourage that happens. So this is an example of some of the businesses that we've been promoting in our campaign of continued operations, safe continued operations. It demonstrates that we have a resilient Cumbria. So, against the odds, these businesses are continuing to operate. I mean, there's loads of other businesses that are doing the same thing. This is just a snapshot. But also those businesses that are diversifying, being innovative to produce PPE or respond in some other way to the need and the demand at the moment. We're also, so it's about presenting that Cumbria sort of resilient image. It's about delivering the message about we need to make sure that we retain our economy, and our economy, I think, often it's misunderstood. The word economy doesn't perhaps reflect anything that's meaningful to people, but what it is our jobs and our businesses, and we want to ensure that we keep those going. So it's about making sure that we protect our economy and in any way we can continue to deliver that work. So going into sort of where we are on lockdown release, or sort of phased lockdown release, what we anticipate is it's not going to be a recovery in the sense of we're immediately going to go back to business as usual. This is going to be very much a phased approach, and we're taking the view of it's a bit of a restart, reboot, rethink approach. So we will start with a kind of restart, so reopening operations safely where possible with social distancing, adaptations in place. Then reboot will be trying to get back on track with growth, helping businesses get back to growing. And then the rethink is about what do we want to be as a county? What do we want our economy to look like? Do we want to continue being net importers of food, net importers of energy, where we have real strengths in those areas and we need to really take advantage of that? And this could be seen as an opportunity to say, let's restart, but in a slightly different way. Let's maximize on the things that through that local industrial strategy we developed, we wanted to achieve, because there is some sort of an opportunity now potentially to do that. So those are the areas that we're primarily focusing on. I just wanted to also highlight some activities that might be of interest that are sort of quite current. So one is the bounce back loans that have been announced this week to support businesses with cash flow. I think they will be much more easy to access than what we've seen from the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. We are looking forward to hearing more about that on Monday, the 4th of May. That's when that's due to be announced in terms of how we can access it. We're also, as the LEP, setting up some weekly Zoom clinics. So this is professional services firms that are offering their time free of charge for an hour once a week to provide businesses with advice. So very much in a similar forum to what we're doing at the moment, but we will have a professional services specialist on a particular theme, a particular area, talking about that issue, and then mainly opportunity for businesses to ask questions and have their kind of concerns raised. So that's due to start next week, and I'll be providing more information on that shortly. And then I wanted to also encourage businesses out there, yourselves, if you do have a good story to tell, either on safe continued operations or restart with social distancing in place, we really want to hear from you. We want to promote what you're doing. We'll get press releases out there. We'll have you on our website. We'll do everything we can to campaign to present a positive image for Cumbria, both at a national and international level. And then also we have initiated an economic impact survey that is now available on our website. I can provide the link to you after this meeting. We really want to encourage businesses to respond to that so we can properly start to track what's going on out there in the county and understand how we can mitigate from the impact more effectively. So I would really value if you could all do your best to complete that survey. It's not a long survey. And just to finish with a couple of, I think, positive messages. We are a county that is very severely impacted, particularly, we have visitor economy and agriculture as two of our most dominant sectors, and they are particularly vulnerable in this situation. But we also have two of the largest businesses in our county, which are absolutely critical businesses that will need to continue receiving support from government, and that won't stop. So in terms of the supply chains of those businesses and the businesses that support them, I think that puts Cumbria in a slightly better position, perhaps, in terms of sustainability. And I think also the serious issues that we have around energy are going to need to be taken really seriously, and hopefully we will be seeing some government policy around energy, and I think Cumbria has a primacy in that space, so I think we have a couple of strengths there. And the final one that I really wanted to say is what I've seen through this and before this situation as well is there is a certain resilience and a certain togetherness of Cumbrian businesses and people, individuals in Cumbria. The response has been amazing to help support mitigation of the crisis and the response to the crisis. And I think that is a unique characteristic of Cumbria, that it is resilient and that it does come together when it needs to. And I think that's a really positive message.
Thank you, Miranda. That's wonderful. We've had just a couple of questions. Do you need to take a break? Just mindful of the coming out, not to put pressure on you, but we're all in this new way of working. Because we can fast forward to do the first 3x3 presentation if you want, or we can put a couple of questions to you now. It's entirely up to you.
I might just take a moment's break and come back to you if that's all right.
That's absolutely fine. There was only a couple of questions that came through, so we'll come back to Miranda. Let me just pause her sharing. I hope everyone appreciates that she's working from home with the kids. I'm sure you do. So we are going to move on to Garry Smith from Thomas Graham and Sons, and he's going to give us a quick 3x3 3-minute presentation. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but Garry, I've just unmuted you, which hopefully you'll be live in any second now. That's not quite gone through.
Now then, I'm just getting my mobile phone ready here. I might not have an egg timer, but the timer will still be on. So, Garry, you know there's no leeway on this. You know how strict I am about these 3x3.
It's good that you're such a forgiving person, Diane. So just to introduce myself, my name's Garry Smith from Thomas Graham's. I'm Sales Director. And really just over these 3 minutes, I just want to discuss briefly, don't be caught out, especially with what we've just been listening to with the news. I want to discuss 3 key points. Firstly, the issue. Secondly, the challenge. And thirdly, a solution. So what's the issue? Well, how can we prepare when the full workforce returns? I think we can all accept, can't we now, that that normal is gone. There won't be a normal again. Social distancing will be here for some time, and rightly so. We want all of our staff to be safe. So that's the issue. But what's the challenge? Well, we've just been hearing before, haven't we, about the availability of PPE. It's on the news every day. Sanitizers, virucidal cleaners. We are a supplier, and we're supporting a lot of the police, NHS, local companies, care homes, etc. But we've been trying to contact our industrial customers to find out what their requirements are. And just interestingly, just to give you a couple of examples, one of them we spoke to 2 weeks ago. The commercial team spoke to their managers. They said, look, we're getting PPE, we're getting what's required. There's no issue when the workforce return. On the Friday, we got a phone call asking for 2,000 FFP3 masks. And as you can imagine, that at the moment is impossible. We then had another customer that we'd spoken to. They'd not considered it. They're a local company, about 600 workers. They went away, thought about it. They came back, and they're now asking for 80,000 FFP3 masks, 80,000 nitrile gloves, and 1,200 sanitizers by the beginning of May. Just to give you a bit of an idea of the challenges that we're getting as a supplier. So we're having to forward order. We're not expecting big deliveries until sort of the middle of June. The massive challenge is counterfeit products. We're checking all of the products that we're bringing in with BSI. Many of the products that we were going to buy, even though they're from what we think were legitimate sources, have been rejected. So there are millions of items coming into the UK without the right certification or the quality checks. So then, as a third part, the solution, what can we do? Well, we all need to be prepared. We all need to be thinking ahead. Contractors, sites, etc. Also, make sure that we're not over-specifying the PPE. Do masks need to be FFP3, or will surgical masks be okay for 2 meter distancing? What are the realistic requirements? Our key suppliers, such as 3M and Moldex.
And that's your 3 minutes, Garry. I'm really sorry.
I do have a list if anybody wants a list of products that we're getting. And thank you very much, Diane.
Really important update at the moment, though, and it may be that we invite you back to do a longer talk about PPE as we get a bit more knowledge about what's going on, really. I think that would be really important. Thank you very much, Garry.
That's what the message is. Talk to your suppliers, make sure that you're prepared for coming back. Fantastic.
All right, Andrew, back to you.
All right, thank you both. Right, Miranda, I can see you're back in the position. So I'm going to just run through some quick questions. We haven't got long because we do have Ieuan Williams, who is going to be giving a nuclear new build update from the NIA. So we do need to make sure we've got enough time for that. But we do have just some, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes for some questions. So I'm going to start with Kath Howard. You were first to put a question in, and I'll just unmute you, Kath, and you should be able to ask that question directly to Miranda now.
Hi, Miranda. Thank you, Andrew. Really, it was to say that there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between some news items or the government saying that PPE is available, linking to what Garry was saying, but then the reality on the ground. And what we're hearing in the social impact managers team meetings is that there's still a lot of need, particularly in community settings, district nurses. And I just wondered what the LEP could do to ensure that all of the people who need PPE are getting it. And I understand it's a balance. The hospitals are understandably a priority, but the community nurses, district nurses are feeling quite vulnerable. And it's quite difficult for us to sort of understand what the reality is. You know, if one person's saying one thing and somebody else is saying, oh, different. So I wondered what they could do. Yeah.
So my understanding is that the sort of social care sector is included in the discussions around this, but I agree it is really difficult to be able to keep on track of what is the need out there, what's the demand in all of the different areas. I think the best thing to do is to take that away in terms of district nurses in particular, and to feed that back to the logistics subgroup, because I'm not aware of whether that's been, I would have assumed that is being included in all of the assessments, but I'd have to check that.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving on, I'm afraid, just so we don't lose time. But I'm going to come to Stephen Shepherd next. You have you pre-submitted a couple of questions, but come to you. You can ask those directly to Miranda.
Right. The first one was really about the grant situation. If anybody else has been refused grants, the couple of clients I work for have applied, but unless you're on small business rate relief, I don't think you qualify.
Yeah, that's right. So you have to have a rateable value of your property under £51,000, or if you're in the leisure, hospitality and retail sector, but then again, it is for small businesses. We have been escalating that. There are businesses that are above that threshold that really need support. There are businesses that are in the supply chain of the hospitality sector that are not receiving support. The support that is there for those larger businesses at the moment is loans, really, and obviously we've had the Sybil's loan, and now we've got the bounce back loans, but we are constantly requesting more higher thresholds for the grants, more grant support for wider sectors, and for businesses that are falling through the cracks. Obviously there are other things like self-employed scheme, but it really depends on what you're doing. And clearly there is the furlough scheme that's there to sort of help businesses through this period as well. But in terms of grants, it is at the moment down to the smaller businesses. And you also have to be the person responsible for paying for the rate relief. For paying your rates, or for the rate relief that you have. So if you are renting a space, or if you're in an incubator in a building that has multiple units, it won't necessarily be eligible. You won't be eligible because the building is over the threshold. So there's all sorts of issues. But yeah, primarily you just have to be a business that's whose rateable value is under that threshold at the moment.
Thank you both. Tracy Todd, I'm going to come to you next. You posted a question in the chat from Miranda.
Miranda, thank you, Andrew. We've been looking at a lot of the data, and I know you've been putting the survey out just to understand what the bigger industry pieces in furloughs, who's going to be downsizing, Redundancies Act. And I just wonder, because I did notice that one of the local councils are actually running a similar survey. Are the LEP talking to the local councils and the Chamber of Commerce to make sure that it's not a duplication of work, firstly, but it's going out to a wider industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the councils and the membership organisations, such as the Business Cluster, the Chamber and others, are all aware of the survey. So they are pushing it out. I think the one that's gone out from the council is our survey. Right. Certainly when I've seen it on social media, it's the LEP survey that they're promoting. The Chamber's survey is slightly different in that it started earlier, so it started pretty much immediately when we went into lockdown, and the LEP didn't feel that it was the right time to be surveying businesses because everyone was trying to work out what was available, what support was available to them. They were trying to work out how they implement the mechanisms and access them, and we felt that people were not in a position to be thinking about surveys at that moment. But, you know, the Chamber has had a good response, and they feed in the data and the information, sort of red flags of what they're receiving information through that survey and intelligence to us. We wanted to do a slightly different survey once we decided it was the right time We did talk to the Chamber about joining forces on the survey, but they felt they couldn't do that because of GDPR reasons, basically data protection. They couldn't share the data that they were receiving through the survey because obviously it's based on their membership. So we decided to do a separate survey. But I think those are the only two that I'm aware of. There may be others, but I think the important thing is that we all start to understand what the impact is. And, I don't think it's too much of an issue if there are a few out there. I think the important thing is that we are doing what we can to respond and just let people know, whether it's the Chamber or ourselves or FSD or anyone else, what's going on out there in the business community.
Thank you, Miranda. There was one final question which came from Kirsten Prosser, but I think that's probably been answered. You mentioned there was some free tailored advice that was available. So we're going to move on. If Kirsten,
I just wanted to touch on that one actually as well. In terms of
very quickly if you can, because I don't want Ieuan to be short on his presentation.
So you can go to the Chamber of Commerce, the LEP funded business support mechanism scheme is Growth Catalyst. You can apply for the Growth Catalyst or the Growth Hub. Either way, you can get tailored business support. So I absolutely encourage you to do that. That is up and running now.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Miranda. Really appreciate that. Ieuan, we're going to come straight across to you, and you're live now. So you can start your presentation and share your screen as and when you're ready.
Will do. Just want to say, thanks to you guys for the opportunity to do this update. I know it's been a while since you've had anything like this from the NIA. So just essentially, first of all, for me, I want this to be more of an opportunity for you guys to ask any specific questions you may have about the state of play in UK nuclear. So yeah, crack on. So just to introduce myself, if you haven't met me before, my name's Ieuan. I'm the Head of Policy and Public Affairs at the NIA. Been with the company about 2 years now. So not been very long, but an awful lot has happened in there. So this is kind of the state of play at the moment. If you can all see the slides I'm sharing. It's taken a bit of a knock over the last year or two. I can't deny. So the only site under construction at the moment is Hinkley Point C down in Somerset, with EDF also very soon expected to submit their planning permission for Sizewell C on the east coast. And the idea there is to have Britain's first fleet effect demonstrated, because the idea is to basically do a copy and paste job of Hinkley Point down over at Sizewell. So they're quite nicely calling it Hinkley Point's Units 3 and 4, which is nice. Not far away in Bradwell, CGN are they're in the final stage now of their regulatory process to get their reactor design signed off by the ONR, and they are planning on building 2 reactors at Bradwell, which would be Bradwell B, and then the other sites in Cumbria, Anglesey and Gloucestershire. So Cumbria, as we know, with New Generation, that was August 2018, I think, that kind of officially all wound up, and the site is now back in the hands of the NDA. Wilver on Anglesey and Albury in Gloucestershire is a slightly different story, with Horizon Nuclear Power suspending programme work at those sites. They have the company still exists. It's still ticking over, albeit with a much reduced workforce now. It had about 300 people. Now it's down to maybe 15. And essentially the whole crux of that situation was financing for a project. The Japanese Hitachi, the owners of Horizon, couldn't see a route forward to make the project happen, and the company was burning through cash because they had 300 people on the payroll. And others, so they took the decision to sort of suspend all activity until they could see a way forward. So it's been a bit of a tumultuous year or two, because I think it was last January, February time when Wilver decision was made to suspend, because Wilver was the most progressed out of the two of Horizon's projects. So, but it's not all doom and gloom. Oh, I should say, so there's a bit of parish notice. I should tell you all first. It was, as of yesterday, key crucial workers in the energy sector are now eligible for testing for coronavirus. I've been told to share that news. So if anyone in the sector and their families are showing symptoms, you are eligible for testing. So that was an announcement yesterday. So it's and coronavirus is a kind of a big part of new build, or we're going to try and make it anyway, because we are going through a bit of a tough time for the economy, depending on how long we have to lock down our progress and industries for. So there's nothing that quite gets an economy going again that's spending, billions and billions of pounds on massive infrastructure projects, and that's exactly what nuclear power brings to the party. So for example, so Hinkley Point C and Moorside in Cumbria are possibly the two furthest sites apart from each other. Yet in the northwest, well over 600 million pounds of Hinkley Point C contracts have gone to the northwest. So and that's not big single contracts. There's about 215 contracts across 184 suppliers in the northwest for Hinkley Point C. So it's really, they are, even though they might seem far away, it's great for the wider economy. So in terms of next steps for the industry, we've been expecting an energy white paper for over a year now, and that's taken a few knocks. We had a new prime minister coming in when Theresa May stood down, and then we had the election with Brexit, then the election, and then the reshuffle, and each of those things has kind of knocked on big policy announcements that we've been waiting for, which is incredibly frustrating, because you hear whispers about what's in these big policy papers and you get very excited, and then you find out it's not actually going to get released. So, and obviously the big delay is now coronavirus. So we don't have a clue basically when the government's going to be able to put out big policy announcements on things like energy or anything beyond just making sure coronavirus is contained. So it's hard to see a bit of a positive at the moment, because while it's great that we have all these sites and lots of work going on behind the scenes to make things happen at them, our existing fleet is coming offline, and that's not something we can really do much more about. They've already had extensions and extensions on those extensions, and if by the end of 2030 all but one of our fleet will be offline, and that's a huge dent in the efforts that we're trying to do towards ensuring we hit our climate change targets. So beyond that, we are also waiting announcements on financing. The government put out a consultation in July last year, which ended in October. We were expecting a response in February on the regulated asset-based financing model, which we were hoping to have an answer on, but we haven't had that. That's all as well has been delayed. It could because it was kicked into the budget, which then ended up being a budget purely to support businesses through COVID. We're still also waiting for further announcements on the next steps of the advanced modular reactor competition that was part of the nuclear sector deal. That's also held up in the department, and then also further steps on things like siting and licensing for SMR, because all these sites here you see in front of you are only pegged for gigawatt scale reactors. You can't technically build anything smaller than a gigawatt on these, because that's just not what the licensing is for. So I'll stop talking there, but I just wanted to know if there's any sort of burning questions anyone may have. I've got some contact details there, just in case anyone wants to get in touch. These will be shared afterwards. So that's what I've got for now. If anyone.
Thank you, Ieuan. There was the first question which we had has come from Ian Ray. Let me just find you, Ian. I've unmuted you, so if you want to put that question to Ieuan, you can do now.
Oh, yes, thank you, Ieuan. You mentioned that energy workers can get tested for COVID-19. Mm-hmm. So my question was, does that apply to workers associated with nuclear decommissioning, such as Sellafield?
I do believe it is, as far as I'm aware. You'd need to I need to read the fine print, but that only came through sort of late yesterday. So we did have an email from the minister. So I'll just check, see what it says. Oh yeah, so if you go to the gov.uk/coronavirus, but basically in the sector, you know, if you have symptoms and you have to leave your home to work and you're over 65 and symptomatic, or anyone in your household has got it, you are able to book yourself in. That's the latest message I've heard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Claire Louise Chapman, I've just unmuted you. You can put your question now.
Oh, thanks. I was just interested in, it's a question about the current situation. Oh, sorry, I've just made sure everybody could hear me. That there are social impact requirements that will come through construction and development, as well as, you know, we tend to talk about social impact once things are operating. So I'm just quite interested in how you're embedding social impact requirements through the various phases of development, but also specifically how you're tackling that in light of the current situation.
Honest answer is I'm not really sure how to answer that one. It's very hard to measure at the moment what the social impact is of what we're doing. You know, there's been lots of good news stories. We're trying to share as many as we can. You know, the industry's donating literally millions of units of things like PPE to the NHS and local hospitals and care homes and things. So it is, you know, in terms of the wide beyond COVID, you know, making sure that there's positive social impact is the root of everything we do in terms of, you know, taking local communities with us on big projects like these, because they are undoubtedly disruptive for a, you know, relatively short amount of time during construction, but the benefits are humongous beyond then. You know, I grew up on Anglesey around Wilver A when it was operating, and the benefits were, you know, that clear to see. Yeah, it's, I think what we try to say to as many developers as we can is that you've got to really maximize the benefits for locals, and especially, you know, and make sure there's a positive social impact. I know Horizon Nuclear Power did a huge amount of work making sure things like Welsh language would be protected throughout their construction, because that's one thing the Welsh nationalists love to bleat on about. So it is, you know, protecting things like that. So I don't know if I don't know, you know, that's very much for the developers to have their own KPIs, but that's the best I can answer that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's just obviously social impact is about the way that you do business, so it's not just about the additional impact, the additional kind of money that you can give to a community. So it's stuff like how you are actually creating local jobs, and it's that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just given that the situation at the moment is that social impact indicators are being revised at the moment to try and reflect things like job retention rather than job creation and stuff like that. So it was just whether it was on your radar, really.
You know, well, not right now, but if I'm honest, but you know, when we talk about these projects, it is always about, you know, there's always a huge figure in terms of, you know, 25,000 jobs during construction, and then it's, you know, the follow-up is, you know, especially with when they're built, you're talking about, especially these new plants, you know, 900, 1,000 jobs for life. You know, those are lifelong, really well paid, really great jobs, and beyond, you know, and the wider supply chain sustaining the areas around them. So it is not just, like I said, you know, with these projects, it's not just necessarily the county or whatever it's in. It's you know, way beyond that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire Louise, for that. I can't see any further questions for Ieuan. I do also believe there was some questions that were sent directly to Miranda, but for purposes of time, Miranda will follow up on any of those questions that she was sent during her presentation, and we'll make sure that we can get an answer back to you. So we're coming up on time. What I'm going to do next is just share the mentee slide, because we'd really like to get your feedback from this session. We obviously use it to plan other sessions. And just while that slide is up on screen, I'll read a couple of bits out to you. Just as a quick reminder as well, that mentee feedback, it is anonymous. So please do give us that feedback because it is valuable and will help us with other events. We did have another 3x3 planned from Brad Meyer, but he sends his apologies. He was having a few audio problems with his IT hardware, so we've missed that for today. I can see Diane has been posting in the chat just some of the other upcoming events. We've got the e-workshop, which is taking place on Friday, which is on managing home workers through lockdown and beyond. It's well subscribed. We've got quite a few people joining us, and yeah, right from CEO level down to sole traders. So there should be a really good variety of discussion in that group. Those tend to be smaller groups. We don't tend to record them, and you know, it just gives people a little bit more opportunity to share some of the circumstances or ask questions that they might be experiencing themselves. We have the first coffee time catch up, which is just, as Diane said, a little bit of a water cooler moment. 3:30 on Friday afternoon. Certainly the feedback from some of the smaller events that we've run, people have appreciated that opportunity just to be able to just have a conversation. In some cases it sounds simple, but you know, obviously we're all under very different circumstances, so just to maintain that that contact with people that we're perhaps more familiar with seeing on a regular basis. And a reminder that next week's member meeting, 6th of May, will be moved to 2 o'clock to allow for Trudy Harrison MP to join us. And we're also going to be trialing a bit of a speed networking event. You might be wondering how that could happen in Zoom. It's not going to be like round the room that is typically done up at Energous, but we're looking at a way that we could possibly use the breakout rooms in Zoom. We can put people into small rooms of 4 or 5 people, and you just be able to have 10 minutes just to do your 2-minute elevator pitch, as it were, and at least it just reminds people of who's in the room and what sort of products, services and support is available from other members within the cluster. So that's just about it. I think hopefully you've all had the opportunity to complete that mentee survey. The details are still up on screen, and what I will do now is hand across to Diane just to close out the meeting.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you to everybody for attending today and being so engaging within the chat. I think it works quite well for us. A huge thank you to our speakers, so Miranda, Garry and Ieuan. Good working on there, Miranda. I think that was brilliant carrying on there, despite your BBC moment. Hopefully that's given you all some really useful information. A final plea from me would be, if you know of somebody that could come and talk to us, whether it's about future work or reacting to COVID-19, please do let us know. We are looking for more speakers, particularly looking for more people to do the 3x3s as well. So thank you all again. I hope you all have a good day, and I really hope the sunshine comes back. Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you at the next event. Take care, stay safe. Thanks for joining us.